In The Road, the author emphasizes that even though trust is essential for survival during difficult times, people must be cautious about who they put their trust into. Throughout the book, the father and the son are put through many situations that are difficult to get out of. The boy relies on the father to keep him safe during these situations, and the boy must trust his father to make the right decision and keep them safe. The boy seems to learn that he must trust people in order to stay safe, and this is shown at the end of the book when the father dies and the boy decides to trust the man who comes up to him and talks to him. On page 283, the boy is talking to the man who came up to him, and he asks, how do I know you are one of the good guys? The man responds by saying, you don't, you'll have to take a shot. In this part of the story, the boy is putting his trust into someone to keep him safe since his father just died. However, this is not apparent throughout the whole book, especially while the father is still alive. The father is very cautious when it comes to new people and places while he is alive, and he teaches his son that he must be cautious as well. On page 151, the boy asks the father if his son is, if you're the only, hold on, here, one sec. The boy asks the father if you're on the lookout all the time, does that mean you're scared all the time? The father answers his son by saying, well, I suppose you have to be scared enough to be on the lookout in the first place, to be cautious, watchful. The father is explicitly telling his son in this quote that he has to be cautious and watchful. The boy does a good job of being watchful as well as trusting towards certain things in the book, which is a big reason why he is able to survive during the most difficult times. Due to the fact that the boy loses his father, he must put his trust into someone who will help him survive. On the other hand, the boy must be very cautious and watchful of who he decides to put his trust into. So that's my first theme. My second theme that I found throughout the book was that the author conveys that human affection is essential during hard times because people help others stay motivated during the most difficult times. Throughout the story, the father and son are able to rely on each other for survival. There are many moments during the book when the father wants to go into an abandoned house or check something out that might not be 100% safe, and the boy almost always would say that he is scared and didn't want to do it. The father would almost always say they had to because they needed to find food or water or they would die. An example of this can be found on page 203 when the father says that they need to go and take a look at an abandoned house in the distance. The boy then tells his father that he doesn't want to, but the father says that they're going to anyway because they haven't eaten in days and that they needed to find food. The boy tells his father that he isn't even hungry and that he doesn't want to go in the house. And this part of the story emphasizes that the father plays a massive role in his son's life, and without the father there to motivate and push his son to keep going, he would not have survived for long. The son also plays a big part in his father's life because he motivates him and gives him a reason to stay alive. Both the father and the son have big parts in each other's lives because they keep each other company and they cause each other to keep going and surviving even when they are at their lowest points. There you go.
That makes me wonder, like, if the father would have made it to the south if he didn't have his son with him, because I think his son was like keeping him like kind of sane a lot of the times because he had someone to take care of him. Like,
yeah, and it kind of gave him an angle. Like,
yeah, like a reason for actually.
And they kind of
what
balance
going
each
on,
other
yeah.
out.
Yeah.
Right.
Alright,
Yep.
you done with your themes?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so my first theme is that McCarthy conveys that one's dreams and memories make living a reality that is tough to face. So throughout the book, from the beginning to the end, pretty much, the dad would always have these memories, like of the mom, or just like before the world was full covered with ash, or he'd have like these happy dreams. And then he'd wake up and it like his mental state would be like even worse because then he'd like realize the reality that he was stuck in and like what he had to face when he like kind of forgot all about it when he was sleeping. And on page 130 it says he sat awake for fear the dream would return. So that's on page 130, and when he was on the beach he would like stay awake as long as he could so that he didn't have like the possibility of waking up like remembering the dream or the memory of like one of the good times that he used to have, and then having to like think about how he has to like go days without knowing if he's gonna get food, if it's gonna be like if he's gonna freeze, if he's gonna get water and stuff like that. And then he also said on page 131 that rich dreams now which he was loath to wake from. So that's kind of like a big word. Like he loathed to wake from like sleeping or whatever, and so like he really didn't want to live.
Mm-hmm.
So like when he had those memories or dreams, like it just made living even worse, and that like carried with him throughout the whole entire book. Like towards the end when he was at the beach, he would like just watch the little boy.
Like not just dreams, but like flashbacks too.
Mhm.
Yeah, like the memories, like the biggest one of the memories that stuck out to me was like when it was the mom, and like the good memories that he'd have of her and like flashbacks, and it just like kind of make everything worse because he remembered like how happy he once was and how good the world once was, and to like now what it is.
Yeah, and I
what he
agree.
has to go through.
Yeah, and I agree with you, especially when he's thinking about after it started and it was happening, and then his wife was getting crazy and she was
Mhm.
speaking irrationally, and she really didn't want to live in that world, and I think it really showed a lot about how much he didn't want to either.
Yeah, but then he lived for his son.
Mhm.
So he went through not only like that world, but also like going through those dreams and like the mental state, like how bad it was after having like those dreams and memories all for that little boy. Okay, so my second theme is McCarthy emphasizes that both survival and compassion must be or are present in difficult times, and the relationship between survival and compassion. And so it's kind of obvious that the dad is mostly like survival. That's like what his goal is, and the boy, obviously his goal is survival. He wants to live, but he also like has compassion, like kind of over that than the dad does. So like when they would meet anyone, like if they'd meet that old man or a guy that was like struck by lightning or that little boy, it was always like for the little boy, the other little boy like in the story,
Mhm.
when he said, what if the little boy has nobody to take care of him? And that was on page 85, and the dad said there are people. Like he didn't really question it, and he like it's a little boy, like he could have no one, but the dad was like strictly like only for them survival. He had like no empathy for that little boy that could like have no food and anything, just so that like they would survive. And I think they kind of balanced each other out too, because then the dad like really had to think about like if someone was like a bad guy or like a good guy, and he like you could trust some people, even though it was kind of hard in that world. And especially for the old man, on page 173, it says they argued about what to give the man. So the boy finally like got the dad to give him food and like sit down and eat with him, and that like it kind of made the dad realize that like other people are going through their struggles too in the world, and it's not just them. And then so the conclusion that I kind of came to with this was that the dad's survival, like that was in his head, got them down to the end, to when the dad died. And then the boy's compassion, so the boy kind of took on his dad's survival mind. And then I think that man that came in at the end took on his compassion. So it was like kind of like a little circle of like switched. So because that man, he could have just left the boy to live by himself and die, but he's like giving up some of his like resources and food and stuff for that little boy.
Yeah, that's really similar to one of my themes, except I said compassion versus indifferent, because I thought that a lot of the like struggling characters that they came across in the book, the father was just indifferent to, and the boy was like too young or too innocent to really understand why the father didn't want to or couldn't help those characters, because the boy just sees like right and wrong.
Because that's what that world is the only one that he's lived in. So.
Yeah. And then I also just said that the father and the son teach each other these skills. So like the son kind of balances out the father when he's getting too harsh, are like too crazy almost, I guess, and then the father's teaching the son how to survive and like how sometimes you have to make sacrifices to keep yourself safe or alive. Yeah. And then for my other theme, I said,
Hello.
Hi.
We have this room reserved,
All right.
please. I'm sorry.
I'm Mr. Laughlin, so we got kicked out of the other room, so now we're in here. But
Part 2.
as I was saying, my second theme is kind of about religion and like believing in God or doubting God's existence, because some characters like the father definitely believe in God, like praising or cursing God all the time for their situation or being really thankful. The father says on page 4, so very early in the book, talking about his son, if he is not the word of God, then God never spoke. To me, this just shows that the son's so important, like, to the father, that he must be just like God's gift, because the son is so compassionate and just like everything right in the world, I guess. And then there's other characters like the old man who is saying that the world is so like grim and the situation's so dire that there must be no God, because a God wouldn't like put the world in that situation. So yeah, that's basically it.
And
I
then the
g-
boy at the end,
Mm-hmm.
like what he said he'd like talk to instead of God.
Oh yeah, at the end of the book, the family that like kind of adopts the boy, they try to teach him like religion, but they say what works best is him just talking to his father instead of talking to God. So like the father and the son are so important to each other. They're like the father's basically God to the son, I think I'm saying. So
Mm-hmm. Shows that they have a strong relationship.
yeah.
Yeah,
Mhm.
I agree with you, Alex. All right, so moving on. My first theme is that McCarthy sets a very high standard for love, showing that it can persist even through the hardest of times. I think that love is one of the most important themes in this book, and that it is used and shown often throughout the book, such as on page 11, when the boy is asking the dad, what would you do if I died? And then the dad responds, if you died, I would want to die too. And he says, so you could be with me? And the father says, yes, so I can be with you. And I think this just shows a lot about what a strong relationship that they have even in these hard times, and they have to push through all this stuff. And I think it kind of shows well how impressive it is that their empathy and love can still thrive even in this world that, you know, is full of sadness and all that stuff. So overall, that's kind of my first theme. And then to move on to my second theme, this one, McCarthy conveys many examples of the constant tension regarding whether or not the man should trust others that he encounters. This is kind of related to your guys' themes as well, but this is the one saying that I think the father, he's very cautious with the decisions he makes and the way that he shows his son how to do things, and also
Treats the people.
that kind of treats people exactly. Such as, and I remember you said this earlier, Ava, when you were talking about how the boy, they saw the little boy run, and the boy was like, we should help him, you know, he needs someone. And I think that the father did a good job of, you know, he doesn't trust anybody, so he didn't go over there, and he didn't, and I think he was thinking everything's a trap, right? Because that
Yeah.
could have been a trap, could have
Because
been
it could
people.
have been like the bad guys
Yep.
trying to like
Having the
lure
kid
them in.
luring the people, exactly. So I think that's a good example. And then also, actually, this is a quote from the book. There was a part when the man that they encountered when they were in the woods, he was the guy who came out from the truck to use the bathroom in the woods. He said this. This is on page 65. He said, I'll bet that boy is hungry. Why don't you all just come on to the truck, get something to eat? Ain't no need to be such a hardball. And I think then the father, you know, he later on, he shoots the guy because the guy ends up grabbing the boy, and he threatens to kill him. And I think that this, and the father, I could tell, was clearly not buying his stories and all that, right? So he was ready for that. He doesn't trust anybody. And I think that quote really shows that that's a good theme for the story, and that it's an important. But yeah, overall, that's It's mine. So I think
Great.
we're good.
Okay. You good?
Yeah.
Is there
Alright.
anything else to say?
No.
Oh.
What?
No.
I thought we were gonna go over something else.
No, I think we're good.
Okay.
Okay. Adios.